Hey, I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like.
Check out our podcast below in the description.
Dramatic news. I mean, definitely. Like, if you had picked one person that you could have put this headline around their name that would get the most attention, this would be it. Nick Saban tested positive for COVID-19, informed his team, had the second test, confirmed it, went home, isolated, talked to his team on Zoom, put Sark in charge. Obviously, there's the element of just, did anyone else contract it from him? I think AD Greg Byrne was reported to also have it. John, both of their health. Saban said he's not feeling any symptoms. And then there's the element of they've got a game against Georgia this week. Biggest game of the year, right? I mean, they got Auburn, too. We could call that the other biggest game of the year. But that's on Saturday evening.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is, in a football sense, I'd say I don't know how you kind of would rank them, but I'd say so far in the football, NFL and college, Cam Newton and Nick Saban are by far our biggest positive tests, like, whoa, in the middle of a game week. Saban happened a little earlier in the week, I guess, right? Recording this on Wednesday. But for college, Wednesday is an NFL's Thursday. Typically, they had practice yesterday. What does Nick pride himself on? Working with the DBs. Like, Nick is not some CEO head coach despite being a CEO head coach. I would say of any quote-unquote CEO head coach, him and Belichick, we never get really great film of Belichick at practice, like working with guys. But Saban, we do, and he is very, very active. So I know he's wearing a mask,
yep.
but he's touching guys, and I don't know what the weather like is in Alabama. It might be a little warm, maybe sweating. I think there's some – as of right now, the information we have when we press record, I think the game is in jeopardy for several factors. One, there could be tests come out for players or other coaches that he's been around. Because, again, he's around the coaches and the players a lot. And two, like, to me, a huge part of this game, they move it to, right, I'd say when I think CBS, SEC, for us on the West Coast is that 1 o'clock, 12:45, whatever the exact time kickoff. When they get the big motherfucker, like Bama, LSU when they're really highly ranked, Georgia, Florida when they're really highly ranked, they bump that bad boy to primetime. And I think the number one star in this game isn't Waddle, isn't Mac Jones, isn't Kirby Smart or any of his guys. It is Nick. Like, Nick is the guy they want to talk to before the game. Like, wouldn't you say he's the number one character in the TV show that is the Bama Georgia game in a weird way, despite not playing?
Well, I don't think it's weird. I think college sports, by and large, is about the coaches because they're the ones that are there year after year after year after year. And no, I would say him and Belichick are the two primary coach characters. The average sports fan might not be able to name an Alabama player, but they can name Nick Saban. They know what he looks like. They know how his teams play. They know how good his teams are. I think given what we've seen happen with teams, by and large, now there are times certainly where somebody tests positive, it's isolated, but we've had so many examples. I think we're somewhere around, I didn't look at the number, probably around 30 postponed games. I don't know if you know the number off the top of your head, but
you're saying in college football?
In college football, yeah, in college football, we're somewhere around that number. So
the NFL's throwing their hat in the ring, right?
Yeah, the NFL's. But I think you're right. When we see a positive test, particularly for a person that talks to a lot of people, just interacts with a lot of people, the head coach, you have to believe that not playing the game is on the table. The other thing is, do they want to play the game? Could you play the game? How comfortable are you playing the game without Nick Saban? Now, it's a home game, right, for Alabama.
It's at Alabama, yeah.
So if they were to play this game, I'm sure the cable company would change over whatever cable provider internet and turn that into an Alabama headset, right? Or the electrical company would turn all their power lines into Alabama headset lines. Saban would have some influence, but this is where, look, if they play this game and Nick is not there, massive opportunity for Sark, right? We talked about it. Feels like he's back to having the path, the doors open in the future to him being a head coach. I had heard that the Colorado football job was his this year if he'd wanted it, or maybe it was close to being his. And, I think part of that was Alabama was a great situation for him. So I do think, right, and this is Saban and it's Belichick, next man up, Pat Hill, pick up the flag. Like, I do think they are in okay shape, as much you'd hate to take Saban away. And I think it'd be a really cool opportunity for Sark. You hate to get it this way, but like you said, I do think the primary thought at this point is you just have to think this game might not get played.
Well, you and I, we've been betting on a game a week, for those that don't know, and we put money last week on Alabama. They did not cover against Lane Kiffin. And I text someone I actually received a text after the game, and they were like, "That sucks for you," or whatever. And he was talking about, this defensive coordinator's taking a lot of shit.
Thanks for the sympathy.
I was like, yeah, fuck. Luckily, it wasn't like a slow burn. We knew it about halfway through the first quarter. Yeah. But he said, one thing next week for Georgia, it'll be a lot like the defensive coordinator in Alabama Roll Tide circles is getting eviscerated. Nick Saban said after the game, in my tenure here, it's never looked like this. Like, this is not acceptable. He said, well, it's going to get a lot easier next week against Georgia for the defensive coordinator, but a lot harder for the offensive coordinator and Steve Sarkisian because Georgia is much better on defense. I do think if this game still goes, and I say with just the little information we have, knowing Nick Saban is at home right now, I would say it's in jeopardy. But if it happens, and if I was the SEC commissioner, I would probably, and it's probably really complicated with CBS, I would look to push it back. But I get if it's just Nick.
Did you bring Nance and Romo into an NFL game in that window?
Yeah, why not?
I mean, then put this game on like Tuesday?
Yeah, I mean, Wednesday. Give it to me any day. I'll watch it. If Steve Sarkisian is the head coach of this game and also the play caller and were to beat Georgia, which is number 2, number 1, however you want to rank them right now, I think it's fair to say
one of the top teams.
They're one of easily the best teams we've seen in college football, not just this year, but the last, wouldn't you say, handful of years? Like, they are a rolling program.
Yeah, well, you'd say
if he were to win this game with Nick at home, like you said, he probably could have been a head coach last year if he chose. I think he would be a 100% lock to get whatever like a top job is. He would be in the mix for that immediately. Right?
Coaching football is not what's kept Sark from being a head coach again.
Right? But there were some questions at SC, the offense and stuff. I think he's resurrected that. And
there was a feeling, I remember when he left, talking to people at Washington, right? When he left and they got Chris Peterson, that's what they wanted.
But that is an upgrade, right?
Yeah. I'm just saying that they kind of lucked it. They felt like they lucked into that. But you're right. There's the element of the off the field stuff that he's worked to overcome. There also is, like Lane, is he just a better football coach now than he was 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago? Right? Most people come out of Alabama better football coaches, and you get the stamp of approval from Nick Saban, and you can, why wouldn't he be an SEC coach? Why wouldn't that be his next job?
One thing I think he's going to get a lot of credit on, he didn't get any credit on Tua, right? Tua was this huge recruit. Tua was going to be good, whether me or you coached him or Sark. I think he's getting a lot of credit with this guy, Mac Jones. We did a video on him. We've been watching him. The dude's, balling. If he gets Mac Jones, and I know he's got great players as the offensive skill guys, if he were to beat Georgia, I can't even explain. Like, I think his stock just in the Alabama community would go up exponentially, but just around the country with ADs, how would you not? I think there's something to be said about Nick entrusting him to be the interim coach, right? Whose call was that? That was Nick's.
Right.
Like, Nick gave him that job. Now, as I'm saying that, he couldn't give it to the defensive coordinator, right? But maybe they have
there's not an analyst
or running back coach or someone that's been there for a while. Now they get naturally a lot of turnover on that staff, but I don't think that's nothing that he just gave Sark that position. That's something, right? Coming from Nick.
Yeah.
Like if Belichick tested positive and he didn't give Josh McDaniels the interim coach and he gave it to little Steve Belichick, we'd be like, oh. But I mean, that's funny, but it's different.
Right. The other thing to keep in mind, because I think, you look at Alabama's schedule and Georgia's schedule, and their bye weeks don't line up. Alabama's bye is Halloween. Georgia's bye is Halloween. Alabama's bye is November 7th.
It always push back the SEC
the following week.
week.
Yeah, but there's also this. Georgia, the game that Georgia plays, November 7th, which is the day that Alabama is on its bye weekend, is Florida, right? Well, Florida is not playing their game this week against LSU. So you're right. In all likelihood, you find a way to move it in at the back. But I don't know. We've seen the NFL, they change in 2 weeks, half of the AFC got its schedule flipped around, right? So
I think clearly hearing you talk, the SEC would probably like to play this game, right? They would just like to get it on the books.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to. Like, the NFL wanted to play all those games. They just couldn't. A couple of them, right? They did not want to move around the schedule.
Yeah, but I think one thing we're seeing with the NFL, and this is where I think them and the SEC are probably on the same page, is like we've seen games get postponed that aren't getting made up, right? The NFL is not canceling games. They're postponing games. I would think
You think the SEC would would cancel a game.
No, I think they would do everything they could to postpone. But
Has there been a conference game canceled in college football yet, though, or are those non-conference games by some of those?
I mean, there's definitely been games postponed. Whether or not those games ever get made up, is unlikely. Baylor just had one.
See, I clearly the
Several,
LSU Florida game was the first SEC postponement pushback. Right? They'd had no issues the first 3 weeks. And this, to me, it at least to my knowledge, was the first issue. And they
Baylor, Oklahoma State rescheduled for December.
So the Big 12's had a couple.
Big 12's had
the SEC really had no choice with the Florida situation, right? When you had 19 players.
Yeah.
And but I think this is just not having Nick at the game. It's not ideal. I mean, from a television standpoint, if you're an Alabama fan, it's not ideal at all. If you're a Georgia standpoint, you want to play this game if you're able to, right?
Yeah,
you don't care.
Yeah. and if Nick and if he and the AD are the only two, then they will play this game, right?
But they could also, assuming let's say Georgia wins this game, and then they run the table and they're in the SEC championship game. If this is Nick's one loss, they will play again. We've seen them play. Feels like several times in the SEC championship game. I guess Alabama didn't make it last year, huh? Because LSU beat them.
To me, the likelihood of having 2 unbeatens in the college football playoff is very low. Even one. I just think this year is so weird. This is an example of it, right?
Yeah.
That it's just, I don't think we can even start. People, you go, okay, what would you do if you had a 1-loss SEC and a 3-loss SEC and a 1-loss Big 12? And I don't think you can. There's so many machinations. I don't even know that you can play that game.
My take on this game, Guy, having watched, and I know you did, we watched that game very, very closely last week. I watched a good amount of the Georgia-Tennessee game right before that game. I think every Alabama fan would agree with this. Their defense is atrocious right now. I mean, it's just all over the place. It's just I don't feel very good about them going into this game because I don't think they play very good defense. So you take away Nick, like I feel way less confident, you know. Yeah. And I already was on the fence.
And I think I think Stetson,
they're not covering anybody.
And Georgia fans might tell us, but I think the Stetson Bennett's better than a lot of people thought. And he has to be better than they thought because they brought in a grad transfer in JT Daniels.
Yeah.
And then,
is he the quickest guy to grad transfer as a sophomore?
What's that?
JT Daniels, the youngest guy to grad transfer in the history of football?
Well, he didn't grad transfer, but the guy from Jamie Newman did from Vandy.
Oh, I was like, damn. I was like,
I do think JT Daniels was close to being able to grad transfer.
That's pretty incredible. But was JT Daniels eligible this year to play or no?
Yeah, he got a waiver, but he was coming off an ACL. So.
Oh, okay. So it was like an injury waiver. Did you see that the NCAA is waiving all this stuff? You might just be able to transfer for free next year? Like if you're JT Daniels.
Your eligibility doesn't cost you anything either, so.
Yeah, I mean, it might just be a free-for-all.
Yeah. Anyway.
The teams in the SEC love those transfers. They eat them up. Okay.
We'll see.
Roll Tide.
We'll see.